Hi, this is Linda Helgeson with Sweet Aria Decor, and today I'm going to show you how to make a deco mesh Christmas tree using a tomato cage. You will need a 33-inch tomato cage, 4-inch zip ties, duct tape, 22-gauge floral wire, a string of 100 lights, 2 rolls of 21-inch mesh, 1 roll of 10-inch mesh, pipe cleaners cut in half, 4 to 6 spools of wired ribbon in 1.5 to 2.5 inch widths, mesh tubing that'll be cut into 24-inch lengths, shatterproof ornaments, a Santa hat, glue gun and glue sticks, pliers and wire cutters, and scissors. The first step will be building out the wire frame by adding vertical wires. Although there are 3 vertical columns that run up in the metal cage, you need to add 3 more wire columns going down in order to have more places in which to attach the mesh. You'll start by placing the tomato cage with the largest ring on the bottom, so it's upside down. Next is take the 3 open prongs at the top, bring them together, and then secure them with a zip tie. So you'll put it around there and pull it tight. You'll still have the ability to adjust it if you need to. Then you'll secure it with the zip tie, and then once it looks good, you'll snip off the end of the zip tie. You'll then want to put some duct tape over that to make sure that nothing is sharp and it stays together. You'll then cut a 2-inch piece of duct tape and wrap that around the open edges up at the top. This will ensure that it does not snag on the mesh and it doesn't snag on you. You'll want to make sure that that goes over the top, and it'll kind of make a little triangle, but there'll still be some ends sticking out. So you'll cut another smaller piece and place that going the opposite way to make sure that everything is done. Once you're finished, it should look like an upside down triangle. It's also best to try to match the color of your duct tape to something that won't show through your mesh. So if using green or red mesh, you can use black duct tape or silver duct tape. If you're using white mesh, it might be best to find some white duct tape. But if you're putting a hat on this, then it won't matter because you won't see it. Next, you'll want to start adding more vertical support. We use this by taking the 22-gauge floral wire, again in whatever color might coordinate best with your mesh, and wrapping the end of it 3 or 4 times around the top of the tomato cage. Then you want to unspool it all the way down to the first ring. You're going to wrap it around that first ring twice, so it's nice and taut, but not so tight that it's bending the wire. Then you'll take it down to the second ring and do it again, wrapping it around twice. And then you'll take it down to that bottom third ring. Still taking care to make sure that it's tight enough without being overly tight. You'll wrap that around probably several times just to make sure that it's nice and secure. You'll then snip it with the wire cutters and the pliers. And then you wrap the remaining end underneath the bottom of the ring enough time so that it gets nice and secure against that ring. And you can also take the pliers and smooth it out, kind of in a circular motion, to make sure that it really conforms to the ring. This will make sure that it doesn't scratch you and it doesn't scratch the mesh. Repeat the same process 2 more times so you've added 2 more vertical wire columns to your tomato cage. Once you're done, you will have 3 metal columns and 3 wire columns for a total of 6 columns. Next, we'll continue to build out the wire cage by adding some additional horizontal wires. Much like we did with adding the vertical columns, we're going to attach these horizontally. You'll start at the very bottom, between the bottom ring and the one above it, about halfway in the middle. You'll wrap the ends of the wire around that metal leg, and then you will stretch out the wire so that it goes across the vertical column and attaches now next to the second metal leg. You're going to wrap that 2 times around there, and then you're going to continue on and wrap it around the next leg twice. And then you'll end up back at the third leg, which is actually where you started. So now you've made a complete new ring. You'll cut the wire again. You'll wrap it around that metal column, and then use the pliers to smooth it out so that it makes sure that it doesn't snag on anything. Now you want to make sure that you're not pulling the wires so tight that it deforms the vertical wires. It should touch the wires, but not be too tight. In all, you'll be adding 5 more horizontal rings to the cage, 1 in the bottom third, 1 in the middle third, and 3 in the top third. By the time you get to the very top one, it's going to be so close to the top of the tree that it will be hard to use the wire spool. You'll have to cut off a piece of wire that's long enough to work with and then wrap it through that way. Next, we're going to add the lights to the wire frame. We'll start by taking a length of wire and snipping off 2-inch pieces using the wire pliers. These will be used to secure the lights to the tomato cage and the frame. Next, we'll take the lights out of the box. They often come with an extra packet of fuses and lights. You want to put those aside because we're going to attach those to the end of the light string later. Most times the lights will come in bunches of 2. We're going to want to start with the bunch that has the female end that does not have the metal prong sticking out. You'll also want to plug them in before you do this to make sure that they work before you attach them and do all the work of putting them on your tree. So you'll start by pulling out and stretching the wires so that they straighten out. Then we'll take the female end of the cord and you're going to separate the cords and put that over the top of the tree. Then you can take the wire that came with the lights, we want to reuse things, and you'll use that to attach the wires of the lights to the tree. So you can twist that a couple times. You'll see that the end sticks out a little bit. Once we wrap the lights around in a circular motion, as we're starting to do here, that will be held in so you don't have to worry about pushing it in any further. So once we've turned it around almost a full turn, you'll take a piece of 2-inch wire and you're going to attach that section of the lights to the tomato cage. Usually it'll wrap around 2 to 3 times, but you'll also want to take your pliers then and kind of pinch it shut. That also helps to make sure there's no sharp edges. So you'll continue wrapping the lights around, moving in a downward spiral motion. Sometimes there are more wires needed up at the top to attach it there because that's where there's most movement, because the spiral is more tight up at the top. You won't need as many wires once you get down to the bottom. So once you've attached everything in the first bunch, you'll then undo the second bunch of wires and start straightening out that portion of the string. And then this will just continue on to do what you had done before. The first bunch will usually end right in the middle of the tree, between the second and third rings. So you will continue wrapping those all the way around as we get down toward the bottom, trying to keep it as even as you can. And then once you get to the bottom, after the last light, attach it to the tree. You can use clear tape. As you can see here, I used a piece of duct tape. It's always handy to keep by because you can never find them when you need them. So if it's attached to the tree, then you know they can't go far. But hopefully you would not have to replace any of the bulbs. Now it's time to add the mesh and create the boughs for your tree. You'll start by unrolling your roll of mesh. You're going to gather your ends together, going from the outside edges toward the center. Then you're going to gather them together in one hand. You can try to get your ends as even as possible, but it doesn't have to be exact, because as you'll see, what we'll do is take the scissors and we'll snip the ends so that they're all even. That creates a nice look. Then you'll want to take the mesh and create almost like a bit of a cape or a bit of a bubble. So the bubble is in the back You're going to take that bottom end and you're going to find your first metal leg that's usually opposite of the end of your lights. You're going to start there by taking the mesh, picking up the tomato cage and putting it behind the metal column so that the mesh actually ends up coming underneath that first rung. Then you're going to take a zip tie. You're going to run that zip tie around the back and then pull it tight so that the mesh is secured to the tree. Once you've done that, then take your scissors and you will snip off the end of your zip tie. Try to get it as close to the end of the zip tie as possible. That way you don't want to have any sharp edges. Next, we're going to take our package of pipe cleaners or chenille stems. And we're going to take about 2/3 of the package out of there. I get mine from Dollar Tree. I like the metallic ones. They're easy to work with. They hold the mesh well, but you can use any kind. And you're going to want to hold these and cut them roughly down the middle. These stems are what we are going to use to wrap around the metal legs and the additional wire that we added. And that's going to hold the mesh to the cage. You always want to be careful though. Do not wrap the pipe cleaner around any of the lights in case you do have to remove the lights in the future. Now that you have the mesh attached to the bottom of the cage, we're going to start by making our first bow. And this one runs roughly 16 inches of mesh is what I use for the bottom. That kind of makes a nice full bow on the bottom that the rest of them are going to rest on top of. So it sets the nice base. You can try a couple of times. You can hold it up to where you're going to attach it, and that's going to be at the part where the metal column meets that first horizontal wire ring that you added. So that's going to be the first place that you add one. You'll put the chenille stem around there and then attach it in there. And then once the mesh is kind of on the tree, then you can fluff it out. If it doesn't look good or you don't like how it might stick out too far on one side, you can always refluff it, take it out, make sure it looks good. It does help too if you put your hand in from behind when you're trying to fluff out the bow. That makes it nice and full and kind of gives you a good idea as to how the rest of them are going to look going up that metal column. So then you go and add the second one on. And again, you want to make sure that when you have your chenille stem that you're wrapping around that metal column, that you're not getting the lights tucked in there. All right, you kind of play around with it a little bit. As you can see here now, I'm zooming in so you can see this is what it looks attached with the chenille stem. You can see that it's just around the metal rung. So when you're going up, it's going to attach to the metal rung on the bottom, then you're going to hit the wire, then it'll be metal rung, then it'll be wire, metal rung, and then you'll hit wire, wire, wire until you get all the way up to the top. After you've attached the mesh with the chenille stems, leave the ends of the stems poking out because you will actually undo this later and tuck a ribbon in there and then retie it. So there is no need to take those ends and tuck them around right now. Leave them as they are. And later on in this video, you'll see also that I sometimes will take the chenille stems and I'll go ahead and put them in the tomato cage right where it's supposed to be attached. Sometimes it just makes it easier to have it there right away. Then I don't have to search for one and try to figure out where it goes with, you know, when you've got something in your hand already. So it kind of frees up your hand a little bit. So I'm going up, and usually at the bottom it'll start probably around, like I said before, like 16 inches. The next one will be like maybe 15 to 14 inches, you know, then 13 to 12 inches. You want to make sure that you leave them fluffy enough. If you make it too tight where the bows aren't large enough, then you're going to have a lot of gaps that'll show up in between there. And while you can add some mesh ruffles in there to kind of fill in those spaces, and it also looks really pretty, in my opinion, you just want to make sure that it's full enough so that you don't want to see through there. Now you can see I'm getting closer up to the top, so each bow is getting a little bit smaller. Once you get into the top of the tree, you're going to take the mesh and you're going to basically flip it over the top so that it'll start to come down the opposite side. So if you went up a metal leg where you should start, then you will come down on a wire leg. So that'll come down there. So you're always kind of going with the exact opposite of the way you went up. So you see here, I twisted it over the top and it kind of makes like a U shape with the mesh. And then we'll take a chenille stem, and working up at the top is a little tricky. It gets a little small in there, so you'll maybe have a hard time trying to get that stem in between the wires, but just the correct wires. So then I'm speeding it up here. You'll see I start going down the other side. It helps to actually have the sides where you can see one and then the other on the other side of it. So you're kind of comparing the left to the right. And you can make sure then that your boughs are made of a roughly equal size. Okay. So once you get down to the bottom, you're going to make your last bough on the bottom of the tree. So you're going to gather up your mesh at about 15 to 16 inches. You're going to hold it together and you're going to wrap that around the bottom rung. And then you're going to pull it up so that it's kind of pulled up against the wire that went down. Because you're going to take a zip tie and you're going to run that zip tie around the mesh and that wire that's just above the bottom rung. And that's going to hold it there. So you can secure that. Sometimes it's easier said than done. The zip ties, sometimes the smaller sizes are hard to get it in the right spot. So trial and error. And then you'll snip off the end of the zip tie. And then you will also cut the mesh. Make a nice straight cut. That'll keep everything from fraying, and it's nice and smooth. And there you go. You have your first third of a tree done. Congratulations. Let's keep moving on. Let's get this tree finished so you can decorate it. That's the fun part. So at this point, you've got one up and one down. Kind of take a look at it, see, okay, I like the sizes. I think this is out enough. You can always undo any of these ties and kind of refluff it and put it back in there if you want to adjust it. But it should make basically a triangle shape. All right, we're good to go. Now we're going to start by gathering up the end of the mesh that we just cut off. And starting fresh like we did before, you'll cut the end so it's nice and straight. And we're going to again start with a metal leg so that we will come down a wire on the other side. So here we have again the cape shape we've made. We're going to put that underneath the metal rung, and that's so it's up against the metal column. And we're going to take a zip tie. And here I'm putting the chenille stems in the spots where they're going to belong. Makes it a little bit easier to get the mesh in. So you can see as I'm doing this in fast motion, I'm again using roughly the same size boughs that I did on the other two sides. And we're going up the tree. Now here you can see we're starting to get to the end of one of the rolls of mesh. So we'll take it as far as we can. And this one seems to stop pretty much right toward the top of the tree. So we'll do our last bough. We still have all that mesh attached that's on the remaining roll. Looks like, hey, we can go up one more. So this is going to stop basically right before we get to the top of the tree. So we don't want to pull it too tight. So at least this way, we did have enough material where it wasn't going to look any smaller than the other two boughs we already put up there. So we're going to make that. We're going to find the chenille stem where we can put that in there and twist it so that it stays. Puff out the bough. Now we have all this extra stuff at the top, so we're going to cut it. I leave about maybe 2 to 3 inches up at the top, so we cut it, and then what you'll do is you can take it and tuck it right underneath that U-shaped top of the tree that's already there. You can always use a zip tie to secure it as needed if you feel that you need to do that, but because we're putting a hat on this tree, you're not going to see what's under the top of this one. And if you don't put a hat on the tree, if you put a bow, then that way that'll cover it as well. Okay, so now I'm going to start a new fresh roll, the second roll, coming up the wire side on that opposite end. Going in slow motion. Now we're getting up toward the top again on the other side. So this completes our 4th row of mesh. Now here we can flip it over. And we're going to do as we did before, kind of making a U shape with the mesh. It's kind of covering the top of that tree. I always like to make it look nice, even if I'm putting a hat on it, because someday you may choose to take the hat off. So it's always nice to have the top of the tree looking presentable. You can do something else with it. So then we'll secure that in there with the chenille stem, which you got to wiggle around those wires up at the top. It's tricky. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes tears have been shed. You get the chenille stem in there and all of a sudden you drop it and it goes down in the middle of the tree and you got to try to feed it through again. So the more you do this, the more you'll get used to it. Okay, so that looks pretty good up there. Looks like a nice shape. It should roughly follow the same shape that you have there. You don't want to have a lot of extra. Okay, that is looking secure. Here we go. All right, and now we're going to snip that. And you can kind of tuck that end in there. And finish fluffing it out. That way it looks nice and full. The fuller it is, too, the more it'll fill out the inside of the hat. And then it has some more space. Fill it out nice and full. Okay, here we go. Now we have to add the last 2. Bear with me, and you may not want to try to create your tree all in one day. It's a lot of work. All in all, this probably takes about 2.5 to 3 hours total for someone who's new at this, so be sure to take your time. Okay, we're going up side 5, getting those boughs in there. Exciting that we're coming up close to the end. You'll see here that I snipped off the extra and I secured the rest with the zip tie, poked it in underneath the top. Now we're starting the last leg. This actually is going to come up on a wire instead of going on a metal leg. And that's just because we didn't continue over the top and then come back down. You could always start at the top of the tree and come back down if you wanted to. I just prefer to start at the bottom. I think it makes it easier to see what you're doing and gives you better access into where you're attaching the mesh to the tree with the stem. Okay, we're clipping off the last part. And congratulations, we have finished our tree. And now it's time to decorate the tree. There are other things you can add to embellish the tree. One example of this is a ruffle, like you're seeing here, or using the ribbon to make an actual bow shape out of a single piece of ribbon. Those are ways to kind of fill in some empty spots if you want to, but you don't have to. So what I do is take the 10-inch mesh, I unroll it, I take either scissors or rotary cutting tool, and I cut it at about a 16-inch length. I usually put about 2 of these per each column, so that usually makes 12 of these. Sometimes I'll add a 13th if I want to add one to the back of the top of the tree, but since we're making a tree with a hat, we wouldn't need that this time. So then to make the ruffle, you will uncurl the mesh all the way, and then you'll bend in each end about 2 to 3 inches on each end, and put a finger in the center of that. And you're going to basically kind of pinch and crawl your way up from the bottom to the top. And once you're done, you'll have something that looks kind of like a bow tie. And you want to keep that pinched, because what you're going to do is on your tree, find where you want to start it and go and undo that chenille stem. So the mesh that you put for the tree should stay in there. You just undo that stem, you put your ruffle in there, and then you can turn it again, and then you have your ruffle. Again, we want to keep the stem ends out because we're probably going to add in ribbon in here. It's optional. You don't have to add in ribbon where you have a ruffle. So now we're going to continue adding the ruffles. What I like to do when I add the ruffles, and also when I'm picking the ribbon and the order that I'm going to put them in, is as you go down, you'll put, each of the 6 ribbons or whatever you want on that column. And then on the next column, I will go one above there. So if I start by putting the ruffle in the 4th position, then next time I would put it in the 3rd position. What that does is it gives it the visual impact of having a spiral, so your eye kind of almost treats it as a garland going around this tree. Or you can just choose to do it randomly. It's however you think that it's going to work best and whatever your personal preference is. And you can put it in there. If it doesn't work, you can decide to take it out. You can put it in somewhere else. It's whatever pattern you want. And again, this is very helpful to kind of fill in any places that look a little sparse, or where you might be able to see between the boughs, or where it looks like you can tell what kind of wires are inside. So as you can see, I'm speeding this up so you don't have to watch all of it, but I liked adding the green. The reason I chose that for the Santa tree is because there's a lot of green in the patterns of the ribbons. So it plays off of that. Now we're going to add the ribbons onto the tree. It helps to have something to measure with. I usually cut my tails 14 inches long. So you can see here I have a bow making tool, and the spot between the pegs measures 14 inches. So I wrap that around. I had a last fragment of ribbon on one spool, so I finished that up here. So I only did 2 on these, but you can see when I take the ribbon, I'm done cutting it, I fold the ribbon in half so that the wires are up on the top, and I cut it angling outward from the center to the outward ends. That gives you what's called a dovetailed finish, so it looks like there's a little V cut into the end of the ribbon. That's like a little nice decorator edge. You don't have to do this, but it does look nice. So overall, you'll need roughly 36 pieces of ribbon in some form if you want to put in something in each chenille stem gathering. So for this project, I decided to do 4 ribbons that I cut at 14-inch lengths. So I cut 6 of each type of ribbon. You'll see me cutting that here. And that's the green Santa ribbon. It's very cute. The other ribbon is red. It has a little bit of a buckle on there. There's another green Santa ribbon. And then this is a white Santa ribbon. I'm going to cut these longer. I cut these at 32-inch lengths. The reason I did that is because instead of just taking the ribbon and just making bending it in half and then putting that in with a chenille stem, is I'm going to take that ribbon and loop it around to create like a bow with two loops. So almost like rabbit ears. That gives it a bit more visual interest on your tree as well. Makes something pop. It looks a little different and it doesn't really cost that much more. Just the extra cost of the additional ribbon. So I do dovetail all of these ribbons as well. So I'm going to cut 6 of the white Santa head ribbon. And then I'm going to get my other pattern out. This is a really cute red and white and green striped pattern. And now we're going to take the mesh tubing. This helps to add a cute little flair to it. And you'll see how we use that in a few moments. This is also optional, but it adds more visual interest. So I cut these at lengths that are roughly 24 inches. If you want to make yours smaller, you absolutely can. I get my mesh tubing from a variety of places, but certain times of the year Dollar Tree does have these tubing bags that are $1 a piece, and it's pretty good quality tubing. So I'm going to cut those for the green, and then I cut those for the red as well. Another thing you can do with the tubing is once you've added it into your ribbon gathering that's on the mesh, so it's going to be the mesh, then you're going to have your ribbon in there, and then you'll put the tubing in there, and we make like a little, it looks like a little bow essentially with that. What that also allows you to do is if you have ornaments that you eventually want to hang on here, instead of gluing something in permanently, you can take a hook and you can hang it from that tubing, and it gives you a place to kind of customize it a little bit more. You can change it through the years, or you can do like I do and you just leave an ornament glued in there. Okay, so now that all of our tubing is cut, we have the tree brought back, and we're going to start attaching our ribbons. So I'm going to fluff up the ribbon that I already put on there, and I'll show you how to put those on in a little bit. One thing you'll want to plan ahead for is what order you want to put your ribbons on. You have different patterns, different combinations you can make. You want to make sure that you don't put 2 of the same colors or patterns next to each other. You want to space it out so it's not too repetitive. So here you'll see I'm starting with the long white ribbon with the Santa face on it. This is one I'm going to make into a 2-loop bow before I put it on the tree. So I dovetail the ends. And then about 7 inches from the end, I'm going to kind of pinch those ends together. So it's going to make kind of, the typical, cancer support ribbon type pattern when you hold it over each other. So you can see that there. Kind of looks like a fish too from the side. And it makes a loop in the back. So you're going to take the end of that loop and bring it forward and pinch that together under your fingers. So you should have 2 tails coming out, and then you'll have 2 ribbon loops. And you don't have to tie it together. You're going to use the chenille stem that's holding the mesh on to secure that. So you open up that stem, you can put your ribbon in there, you can close it again, and then it's attached. So at that point, it'll let you start fluffing out your ribbon. And then you can decide at this point, do we want to use some mesh tubing here or not? As you can see here, I'm kind of holding it up, giving myself an idea of, is this going to be too much? Do we want to do this or not? So here's what that would look like. You can see I just brought the ends together, makes a little bow. Hold it up there, and I think that might be a little bit too busy. It takes away the focus from the prettiness of the two bows. So, I decided not to do it. So I take it off. A lot of this will be trial and error. Try out what you like, what patterns you think look good together. If you want a really full tree, add more stuff on it. Some people may like just a sparse tree. You may not even want to put any ribbons on your tree. It's all basically personal preference and what type of look that you're going for. So I just refluffed my bow, put the tubing to the side. Okay, now I'm going to start working with the regular 14-inch lengths of the ribbon. So you see here, I lay it flat, and then I fold it in half. That makes a crease down the middle. That's going to tell me where I want to pinch that ribbon together. You can see that's the center. I'll pinch that ribbon. Then I will go undo the chenille stem that's holding on the mesh. And at that point, the mesh should stay in there fairly well by this point, even with the stem undone. So I put the ribbon in, hold that in there, and then I take the two ends of the tubing, put them together to make the fish, bring in the middle, makes a nice little bow, kind of like a shoelace. I put that in there, and then I will twist the chenille stem closed. And then at this point, I will take the ends of the stem and I will just tuck them around to the back of the tree. If you have enough space and you want to kind of twist them together, you can, but seeing as how nobody looks up the middle of the tree, it really is just a matter of personal preference and how much effort you want to put into it. So now I'm taking the red Santa belt ribbon, which is one of my absolute favorite patterns because it is just so cute. And I'm looking there, oh, I was going to maybe use the red tubing, but it kind of, you can't really see it very well then. So at this point, I think I decided to take out the tubing that I had already put on there. And I was going to switch that one out because if you have a green ribbon, you probably want to use a piece of red tubing. If you had a red and white ribbon, you'd probably want to use a piece of green. It's using whatever is the opposite. That's going to make the appearance of that tubing pop much more against the ribbon. And again, the tubing is completely optional. It's not always easy to find in certain places too. I've never been able to find it in an actual craft store other than Dollar Tree. I have to order it from online retailers. Alright, so now I'm fixing out my green. I've switched out the tubing. And I'm going to go back now and focus on putting on my red Santa belt ribbon. And I'm going to use that with green tubing because that is going to pop differently. Alright. You'll see here I've put that one in where there's a ruffle. When you're putting in a ribbon where there's a ruffle, you want to open it up and you want to slide the ribbon so that it sits under the ruffle. That makes everything lay a little bit nicer. And even with the chenille stem cut in half, there is still enough room in there to hold the ribbon and the ruffle and the tubing because you don't continue to twist it. You keep opening it up, putting more in, and then closing it back up. That gives you enough room to work with. Okay, and then just kind of make sure you pull out your ribbon so it's nice and even. It should sit and kind of make a bit of a V shape. And the next ribbon that we're going to pick is the other green pattern Santa ribbon. This one was just his head. I think I got that from Joanne. So we secure that in. This time we're going to use a piece of red tubing, make the fish shape, bring it back into center. So you have your little shoelace bow. You see I cut the end off. Depending on how that's wrapped in the package, sometimes the ends get a little squished. So you may have to trim a little bit of it. A lot of times the tubing will bounce back, but sometimes it's just a little too crushed. So you can just trim that off. Okay, and I am attaching that green one. You can see how it's really starting to look nice, giving the tree a lot more color and a lot more visual interest. And then I'm adding in the 1.5 inch green, red, and white striped ribbon. It's always fun to vary the widths of your ribbon as well. I've never put a 4-inch ribbon on a tree just because it's only a 3-foot tall tree. That might look like a little much, but I'll try that next time. But changing up the widths is another way to kind of create more visual interest as well. All right, and I'm putting in the green tubing there. All right, fluffing that out, making sure it lays all nice underneath the green ruffle. Okay, so you continue to add the ribbons then going in the next row. As I mentioned before, what I like to do is to just add the next ribbon one up higher from where it was on the previous column. That creates the impression of having a garland that's going down in a spiral. But of course you don't need to do that if you don't like the idea. Making another bow there and attaching that in. Making those bows is a bit more time consuming. If you want to take the time to do it, you can. I did it. It looks okay. I'm not sure I'm going to do it too many other times unless it's, you know, for a specific kind of look. But I wanted to give you an example of the different types of things that you could do in your tree. Okay, and we are finishing up. You continue and add the rest of the ribbons. Now it's time to add the ornaments onto your tree. So I've taken 1.5-inch shatterproof ornaments. I've gotten these at Dollar Tree. They're usually 12 for $1 in a tube. I've opened them up in green and red, put them in a basket. I apply some hot glue just to the one side of the top of the ornament. And then you just go and push that on. You're going to attach it not to the mesh, you're going to attach it to the ribbon. So you push it on the ribbon. You should be able to feel the heat of the glue from the underside of the ribbon. I recommend using something like Gorilla Glue. That way, in case you store it somewhere where it gets warm, the glue isn't going to melt and the ornaments won't fall off. I like to alternate the colors and also alternate the sheens. So I can go red, green. Also make sure if it's, you know, glitter, matte, shiny. And you don't have to add them onto every bow. It could be just select few, or it could be every one. I did not add them onto the ribbons that had the 2 loop bows. I only put 4 on per column then. You can see that's where I'm adding the rest of those ornaments. Be very careful not to burn yourself, and also do not glue yourself to your tree. I speak from experience on that one. Now we're going to add the topper to your tree. This can be a bow, or in this case, it is a cute little Santa hat. So here you can see I had a bow that was already made. I wanted you to see what it would look like if we put it on there. So I thought that was a little much, a little big. So for this one, putting on a Santa hat. You can see here, I literally put it over the top of the tree as if it was Santa's head. You can play around with it. One thing you can also do if you want your hat to stand up a little more is to crinkle up some tissue paper or a plastic garbage bags and put it in the top of the hat. And you see here I am taking some hot glue. I'm gluing the hat to the mesh. I'm putting the glue directly on the hat though. I do not put the glue on the mesh. And then you just hold the hat down onto the mesh, press down for a few seconds, and it will hold. You don't have to do this because perhaps you may want to exchange it for a bow in future Christmases. But I know this one's going to stay Santa for me, so I glued this one on. Then you can play with the end of it too. Do you want to have it stand up more? Do you want to flop the end over? So you'll see in a minute I kind of play with a couple different options. There's usually a seam that'll go in the back. And it's important to note this is a child size Santa hat. The adult size ones are a bit larger. The child size ones seem to work really well with this 36-inch tall tree. I say 36 even though it's a 33-inch tall cage, but by the time you put a bow or you put a hat on the top, you want to accommodate for those extra couple of inches. Congratulations, you did it. Now it's time to sit back and admire your work. These would be great to give as gifts if you have someone that's in a nursing home or a small apartment. This makes a perfect gift. You can also put it on an entryway table. You can make it a centerpiece. There's a lot of different things that you can do with this. And here's what it looks like all lit up. That's the glory right there. Perfect. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope this helped you, and I wish you luck making your own tree. If you like my video, please subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Facebook under Sweet Aria Decor, and I have an Etsy shop under Sweet Aria Decor, and also a website, meshtrees.com. If you want to give me feedback as well, that'd be greatly appreciated, and I would love to see pictures of your completed trees. Thanks.